Hi, how are we doing everybody, and welcome to Russell Heritage Golf. Today we're talking about how to get the club face square at the point of impact, but I'm also going to be talking about this sort of analogy because people are asking questions about it in terms of this sort of turning the corner analogy, or if you like, this sort of whip effect as to how we create club head speed at the bottom of the golf swing. Now, basically what needs to happen in terms of a movement perspective is that when you swing the club up towards the top of your backswing, you'll create a relationship between the shaft and the lead arm. So the lead arm should be straight and there'll be an angle between the lead arm and the shaft. Let's just suggest it's a 90-degree angle. Now, as you initiate the downswing, the first thing that would happen is the lower body would start to rotate. As the lower body rotates, it will start to introduce a rotation of the upper body, which then means the lead shoulder is going to start to make its way around towards the target. Now, that's absolutely fine. If you were to stop at this point, you would generally notice the way that the shaft would be pointing down towards your ball to target line, or it might be an element of shallowing on that. It doesn't really matter, but it should naturally start to fall the club down in this sort of place. Now, what would happen from here is that as my lead shoulder now starts to work upward and creates a straightening on my lead side, it continues to pull the arm down. Now, by the time we get the club to a horizontal position, the way that we hit the ball is there will be a rotation around the lead forearm, but there'll also be an element of ulnar deviation. And what this does is it encourages the correct amount of rotation to get the club face square at the point of impact, but it also encourages the correct amount of ulnar deviation, so you can see the way the shaft continues to point down towards my ball to target line, which basically means it's encouraging the club to work on the correct arc. Now, this would happen very naturally. Okay, the things that kind of stop you from doing this sort of thing, if you know that you get flicky or you get yourself in a bit of a mess at impact, is based on the kind of sequence of events that lead to that point, which basically means that if you kind of slid and your shoulder drops back, then all of a sudden you're out of sequence and you're going to be forced to kind of release the club early so you can still hit it. So what's important to understand is that if you manage to sequence your events where you move this way and then you started to pull the lead shoulder up, you would find that you would very naturally start to create this sort of releasing. Now, what is going on then, right? So basically, what is this sort of whip effect and what is this sort of turning the corner? Now, as you'll see, if I kind of do a few swings just with my lead arm only, as long as I encourage my body to rotate, you can see the way the club is naturally straightening as I come down towards impact without me consciously thinking about things that I've discussed, about the rotation of the forearm and about the kind of straightening of the wrists. So what happens in the golf swing is that if we imagine that if I kind of swung up towards the top and I started to initiate a rotation, and if I was to let go of the club at this point, it would just fall straight down towards the ground. But as soon as my lead shoulder starts to make its way around up and behind me in space, and then if I started to do this with an element of kind of force and I was to let go of the club, it would naturally want to create a straightening motion and the club would go flying down the driving range. And this is a kind of centrifugal force. So the point is that as you're applying this force with the shoulder to get out of the way, the club is naturally wanting to create a straightening. And that is basically what is happening. So as the club is naturally creating this straightening, the club is wanting to create a down cocking motion. It's wanting to create a straightening motion coming in towards the hit. And this is how you can create a tremendous amount of club head speed, because as the club head starts to rotate around the hands and it starts to create this straightening, that's how you can create a lot of club head speed around the bottom part of the swing, which has been proven. We know, thanks to the science in the game now, that we create a large proportion of our club head speed through this natural rotation at the bottom part of the golf swing, which is what we see obviously with all the professional golfers. Is where we start to see this kind of, if you like, this sort of car analogy of turning a corner, or if you like, the whip effect. Because basically what's happening as we come in towards this impact area, as the club starts to work more outward in terms of relationship to the hands and works more downward, because of the way that we're swinging the golf club, this is what will start to create a huge amount of speed. And you can see the way as my shoulder is turning the corner, so to speak, in terms of the driver, then it naturally starts to throw the momentum of the club going through the hit. Now, like I said, is it important to understand? I think it is to a degree, okay? Because as you can see with this sort of demonstration today, I've done it mainly with my lead arm, which is going to bring me to my point at the conclusion. okay? But I think it's important to understand that this is a very natural move. And if you found that you just swung the club like I'm doing in the garden at home, you'll naturally create a decent amount of club head speed, because you'll generally find you're forced to create the correct sequence up to this point. If you try to do this and you kind of, let your left shoulder come back first and foremost, you'll still feel the same force. But the problem is obviously when you come to doing it in a golf swing, you're not keeping the club on plane, and the club isn't going to be straightening out at the point of impact. It's going to be straightening out at a different point, which is why golfers then start to get discrepancies in things like the club path, but also not having the ability to control the low point of the golf swing. Now, therefore, if you understand that, right, if you understand that this sort of relationship here, as soon as this changes direction, is going to create this natural straightening of the club. This is why if you wanted to create more club head speed, you would try and hold on to this relationship for as long as you possibly can. Because the longer you can hold on to it, and the later you can start to create this straightening, so this kind of outward and downward movement of the golf club is going to help you create more speed at the bottom part of the golf swing. So you're going to start to notice this straightening is happening in the impact area as opposed to any part of your swing, which is going to help you create more club head speed. So that's the point of this video, and it's a good introduction because I'm going to start talking this week very much about this. And I started to talk last week about the release in terms of the ability to keep the lead arm working straight in the through swing. And that's why I've demonstrated today's video just with one arm, because you can see the way I can naturally create a rotation of the club head as it goes through the hitting area with just my lead arm, and I'm not having to create a huge amount of whip like this. And that's what I'm going to start to talk about. I'm going to start talking about now in the upcoming videos things about your rhythm and what should be happening with your trail hand coming in towards the hit. Because my concern is I think a lot of people can feel this. I see a lot of golfers start to use these sort of contraptions now, which helps you create more club head speed. And I see a lot of golfers even using things like a cane and coming down to the range to warm up in. But I see a lot of this sort of whipping effect happening from the right hand for a right-handed golfer. And the problem is that if you start to move in this sort of fashion as a right-handed golfer, you're never going to have the stability of the club face, and you're never going to be able to get that club face repeatably square at impact. And that's why I think it's important to understand that you can create the whip effect naturally with your lead arm, and if you can get that rhythm and timing, which I'm going to talk about, then it gives you a chance of maximizing your distance but also getting the club face square at the point of impact. So as always, appreciate a thumbs up. What's also absolutely free, I actually mention this in every video, is that you can send your swings into the channel. Use the social media links which are in the description below, absolutely free. Offer you a few little tips and advice, or at least point you in the direction as to what video I would suggest would be worthwhile you watching most. Loads of people doing that, happy to keep that going, it's helping people out. What's also absolutely free is to press that subscribe button, press the little bell icon, that means you'll receive notifications every time a new video comes out, and I'll catch up with you soon.